At a cemetery high in the Pamir Mountains, archaeologists found wooden burners carrying a chemical trace that survived for 25 centuries. The residue pointed to cannabis burned during mortuary ceremonies, not a modern pipe and not an internet myth. That discovery gives us one unusually clear answer inside a much harder question. When did humans begin inhaling smoke on purpose? We will separate 4 things that are often collapsed into one story: living near fire, burning fragrant material, burning psychoactive plants, and using tobacco. And when we reach a famous claim about Neanderthal smoke sensitivity, a later experiment will force us to reopen the case. The result is not a neat invention date for smoking. It is an evidence map with very different levels of certainty. Start with the oldest category, smoke that people may have breathed simply because fire was useful. Archaeological fire evidence appears across deep time, but the record is patchy, and the meaning of every burned layer is disputed. A hearth could provide heat, light, protection, and cooking, while also placing combustion products close to human faces. That is exposure to smoke. It is not yet proof that anyone wanted the smoke itself. Fire use was a long process, rather than one clean breakthrough made by one named hominin population. Some fires burned in open settings and others in shelters, so there was no single universal prehistoric smoke dose. What modern chemistry can tell us is what wood smoke may contain: fine particles, carbon monoxide, volatile compounds, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. Those ingredients can damage health, but a modern toxicology review cannot calculate the lungs of one person beside one ancient hearth. The World Health Organization still documents a major disease burden from household air pollution produced by incomplete combustion today. That modern evidence makes ancient smoke biologically plausible as a cost, not measurable as a daily prehistoric death count. So did repeated fire exposure leave modern humans with a special genetic shield? The tempting answer focuses on the aryl hydrocarbon receptor, or AHR, which helps cells respond to several combustion-related chemicals. A 2016 laboratory study reconstructed modern human and archaic hominin receptor variants and reported different responses to selected ligands. Its authors proposed that the modern human variant may have reduced sensitivity to some smoke-associated compounds. That finding became a dramatic story. Modern humans tolerated smoky caves, while Neanderthals were poisoned by them. But receptor assays are not prehistoric survival trials, and the study did not show that smoke drove Neanderthal extinction. More importantly, a later team tested reconstructed receptors and found Neanderthal and modern human AHR responded similarly to TCDD. The later result does not answer every ligand question, but it breaks the idea of one settled, enormous species gap. So our first payoff is deliberately untidy. Ancient smoke exposure is real, while a uniquely human genetic smoke shield remains contested. There is no need to invent blackened prehistoric lungs or a single mutation that rescued our species. The firmer story begins when an archaeological object shows that a particular plant was deliberately placed into a burner. Even then, deliberate burning and deliberate inhalation are related conclusions, not identical ones. Text matters. Residues, burner design, associated burials, and the chemistry of the plant must all point in the same direction. That standard will become crucial when the Pamir Braziers return later in the video. For that strong case, ritual smoke shows why motive is difficult to recover from ash alone. People in many societies burned aromatic plants and resins, but fragrance, ceremony, and drug effect are not interchangeable explanations. A burner in a sacred place can reveal repeated combustion without preserving the exact thought of the person who lit it. The same visible plume might perfume a room, mark a transition, accompany prayer, repel insects, or combine several purposes. That is why an attractive historical story cannot substitute for residues in archaeological context. It is also why natural incense should not be treated as chemically harmless. Modern reviews find that incense smoke can contain fine particles and other combustion products capable of irritating or damaging airways. Those findings concern modern exposure measurements and experiments, not the diagnosed health of one ancient priest. They also do not justify a universal claim that every incense mixture is more toxic than every cigarette under every condition. Defensible conclusion is simpler. Smoke from a non-tobacco plant is still smoke, with dose and ventilation shaping the risk. Ceremonial meaning does not cancel combustion chemistry. Chemistry alone cannot tell us whether lightheadedness, scent, symbolism, or social ritual mattered most to participants. To identify intentional psychoactive burning, we need a plant marker, a heat source, and a context that fit together. That combination is rare because smoke disappears and organic material decays. A written legend can suggest a practice, but chemistry can test whether a burner actually held a particular plant. This is what makes the Jirzankal evidence unusually powerful. It does not require us to diagnose an altered state from a skeleton or romanticize a funeral. It lets an object, a residue, and a burial setting carry the argument together. Now return to the high mountains and open the strongest case. At Jirzankal Cemetery in the eastern Pamirs, researchers examined wooden braziers associated with burials. The cemetery dates to roughly 2,500 years ago in the first millennium BCE. Several braziers held stones that had been heated, creating a practical surface for burning plant material. Gas chromatography and mass spectrometry detected cannabis biomarkers in residues from the burners. This is not a guess based only on the shape of a pot. It is a chemical result tied to a funerary context. Nabinol, an oxidation product related to THC, was among the key signals reported by the researchers. The residue pattern suggested cannabis with stronger psychoactive chemistry than expected in many wild populations. But the evidence cannot tell us whether people bred those plants, selected naturally potent plants, or obtained them through exchange. The authors interpreted the burners as evidence for cannabis smoking during mortuary ceremonies. Here, smoking means smoke produced from heated cannabis and likely inhaled around the ritual, not a recovered rolled cigarette. The combination of burner, hot stones, biomarker, and burial context makes deliberate psychoactive smoke the best supported interpretation. It remains one local archaeological case, not proof that every ancient society used cannabis the same way. It also cannot reconstruct the concentration each person inhaled or exactly how the smoke moved through the ceremony. Still, this is the moment where our evidence moves beyond accidental hearth exposure into intentional plant burning with a psychoactive purpose. That distinction is the center of the video. Proximity to fire is not the same as choosing a smoke-producing plant. The Pamir find supports purposeful use, but not a global first and not a proven invention date for inhalation. Archaeology rarely gives a first. It gives the earliest case that has survived and been recognized so far. That surviving case is already enough to show that people deliberately engineered plant smoke long before modern cigarettes. Then, a much older hearth in Utah complicates the story with a different plant, tobacco. The site is called Wishbone, on the edge of the Great Salt Lake Desert. Its evidence is older than the Pamir Braziers by almost 10,000 years, but less specific about what people did. Tobacco is native to the Americas, so the question is not whether the plant existed before cigarettes. The question is how far back a human relationship with tobacco can be demonstrated. Research published on the Wishbone site reported 4 charred tobacco seeds from a hearth dated to about 12,300 years ago. The hearth belonged to mobile hunter-gatherers, placing tobacco use thousands of years before agriculture in the region. The authors described it as the earliest direct evidence then known for human tobacco use. But charred seeds do not preserve a verb. They do not tell us whether tobacco was smoked, chewed, processed, discarded, or used in another way. No pipe from that ancient layer converts the find into a familiar smoking scene. So this is strong evidence for tobacco use and weak evidence for the precise route into the body. That difference is exactly why the older tobacco find and the younger cannabis burners should not be ranked by date alone. Wishbone is older but behaviorally ambiguous. Jirzankal is younger but more directly tied to intentional smoke production. Put all 4 layers together and the history stops looking like one straight line toward the cigarette. Full fire created incidental exposure. Ritual burners made smoke meaningful. Psychoactive residues reveal purposeful plant choice. Tobacco seeds reveal deep use without a known method. None of those facts proves that humans evolved an immunity to smoke. Modern health evidence shows the opposite boundary. Combustion remains biologically costly even when the material is natural. Wood, resin, cannabis, and tobacco produce different mixtures, but natural origin does not make inhaled particles harmless. The AHR studies are a useful warning about storytelling as well as genetics. One striking laboratory difference became a sweeping evolutionary narrative before counter-evidence narrowed the claim. The responsible conclusion is not that Neanderthals lost a smoke contest, it is that the receptor story remains unsettled. The strongest ancient evidence in this video is archaeological context, not a reconstructed tale of species superiority. We can identify burned plants and dates more confidently than we can recover breath, dose, intention, or private experience. That uncertainty does not weaken the story. It tells us which part of the story is actually evidence. Ancient humans did not invent one thing called smoking in a single moment. They repeatedly turned combustion into heat, scent, ceremony, and eventually well-supported psychoactive smoke. The objects left behind preserve different steps of that process, and they become clearer when we refuse to make them all say the same thing. Subscribe to Oddly Evident for more strange human histories, where the evidence and its limits stay visible. The cigarette is therefore not the inevitable endpoint of a single prehistoric habit. It is a later technology that packages combustion, dose, and repetition in a very different way. The ancient record explains neither modern dependence nor a safe threshold for inhaled smoke. What it does reveal is repeated human experimentation with fire, plants, and meaning. Sometimes the evidence is a chemical fingerprint. Sometimes it is only a seed in ash. Those 2 traces answer different questions, and treating them honestly makes the history more surprising, not less.